Hey everybody, it's me Ashish, and before we begin, I just want to give a quick thank you to everybody listening, watching, and supporting the podcast. It means the world to us, and we're so appreciative. I just want to let you guys know that you guys can always ask us questions, give us segment ideas, and keep up with the fun, all at AshishandFriends.com. We're on Twitter at AshishandPals, we're on Instagram at AshishandFriends, and hey, we're even on Facebook, facebook.com/AshishandFriendsPod. If you're watching this video, please go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to the channel. All that following and liking and subscribing will help us grow and keep going, so we appreciate it so much. And once again, thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Yes, welcome to another great episode of the Ashish and Friends podcast. As always, I'm your host Ashish, and you can catch me on Instagram and on Twitter at AshishAiri. Of course, I'm joined by my longtime friends and co-hosts. We've got Shahan at Shahan Jayaraja, we've got Dev at Superlaser, and we've got Ryan in the house. So, the new gen consoles have just dropped, the Xbox, the PS5. Which one are you playing? Let us know. But with that, NBA 2K updated the rankings and the ratings. So with that said, we're like, hey, let's discuss what they have rated, what the tiers are, and have a little discussion about that. So let's jump right into this game, guys. So to start it all off, we got LeBron James rated out of 98 as number one. Is that okay with you guys? You guys feeling LeBron is worthy of the number one spot?
I think he's the number one. I think he should be a 99. Let's be real here.
I think that like the big thing about all of this, right, is that this is all scale score. And so, to me, right, like I think that the number one guy in the game should be a 99 because, it's more relative to everybody else than right. Relative to anything else. And so, I mean, obviously this is not the best LeBron that we've ever seen. That I would say that that's the 2012, 2013 LeBron, but still, I kind of feel like the number one guy should be a 99. Kind of like, in Madden, obviously, they make a big deal about the guys who reach 99 status. I feel like it should be like that here.
Yeah. I also agree. The problem is that you just won't, if you use that kind of system, the ability to compare players between games, right? It's kind of like at the dunk contest where they give everyone a 10, right? it kind of like ruins what it means. It just becomes tricky. Because, like, the problem is, like, if LeBron is a 99 now, what is 2012 LeBron?
99 in that game. I mean, I don't know.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, the number one player in the game. I don't know. Right. To me, what, do you go back and sort of look and like, oh, man, LeBron this year was a 98, whereas, in 2015 he was I never do that, right? Like, I only play it in the context of the game that I'm playing.
I guess that's fair.
We give him extra credit in 2012.
LeBron is definitely the best player in the world, right? And that's what's important, and that's what's reflected here.
Yeah, I mean, Ronnie 2K needs to get his shit together. But hey, at least he's the only one rated at a 98. I feel like Ronnie saw him with the beard and saw the white patch in his beard, was like, nah, this is not 99 worthy. We're bringing him down to 98 and nerfing him. But all right, so next up we got the Greek Freak at a 97. It's pretty close, and he's also like by himself at a 97. No one else is there. What do you guys think about that?
I disagree with that. I think just too high for him. They rated his three-pointer better than Jimmy Butler's and just below Anthony Davis, which I think is by far way too highly rated. I think he shouldn't be more than like a 95, or I have him as a 95. For that reason, his shot is just too poor to be a 97, in my opinion.
So my question is, back if you made NBA 2K1, I guess 2K1, are you making Shaq a 95? He couldn't shoot threes.
That's a great point. I'm making him. His offensive prowess is so much better than Giannis's, I think.
I mean, I think the more important thing with the three-point rating is that, like, is Giannis a better three-point shooter than Jimmy Butler?
No,
is that where we are?
That rating's wrong, right? That rating's clearly wrong. But like, if we're talking about 97s, right? Like, look, I think that we've kind of forgotten because obviously of what happened in the playoffs. Like, Giannis for the season averaged 29.5 points, 13.6 rebounds, 5.6 assists, and a 32 PER. Those are objective.
And on 30 minutes a game.
And on 30 minutes a game, like, saying that he's as dominant as this season was, but those are 2000 Shaq numbers, right? Like those are legitimately like historic all-time numbers. And
right. So no one has. So I was watching a video where they adjusted all of these numbers, like for pace, and for like other just random parts of like efficiency, during the seasons, and that is a unique season. 30,
yeah.
like his season was 1 of 1 basically. No one had done what Giannis did.
Right. And obviously, right, like he's back-to-back MVP. And you can't say that he's taken the role as the number one player. I thought that, either of the 2 years, I think he had the opportunity to take that title, and I don't think he did. But, ultimately, it's like we don't have to sit here and overthink it, right? Like Giannis, for 2 regular seasons in a row, was the best player in the world. They didn't win in the playoffs, but it certainly wasn't because Giannis wasn't good enough. Again, I do think that team success is sort of that last step for him to take the number one spot. But I mean, come on, we don't have to sit here and overthink it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason he's the one of the most sought after potential free agents next year, right? And he's always in everyone's mouth. He's that kind of game changer, the people love to watch. And it's just sad. I think maybe he should be deducted a point or two. Not the first in his family to win a championship. You gotta take an L on that, to be honest. But all right, so when we're doing tiers here, right? Like we have the S tier that is like the top of the best. These are the best of all time. So Giannis is up there with LeBron, right? And I feel like after that conversation, there's some other MVPs, and we're gonna get into them right now. So we'll have a little discussion here. Right here, we've got Kawhi Leonard at a 96.
Nope. Nope. I mean, look, Kawhi Leonard is a fantastic player. Kawhi Leonard is like a really he's a Hall of Famer, all that sort of stuff, right? He's everything that they say he is. But we don't have to sit here and lie to ourselves that Kawhi Leonard is better than Kevin Durant or Steph Curry. We just don't have to do that. We are all reasonable people here. We don't have to lie to ourselves. And Kawhi is a legit, again, like I mentioned, everything that they say he is on that Raptors team, he put them over the top, everything like that, right? That you can, there is the possibility for him to go and win a title as your best player. But are you kidding me? Steph Curry led the greatest, the greatest individual season in basketball history. Kevin Durant, obviously an MVP winner, a guy who's won everywhere that he's gone. And guess what? Kawhi was out in the second round of the playoffs last year with a team that was more talented than the team he was playing, right? That's fundamentally what it comes down to.
Well, to counter that, Kawhi led every statistical category on that team in the playoffs. But he was the only one who was actually producing on that team. Granted, he did suffer a couple of those games in that second series that caused him to lose. I can't defend that of him. But no, I agree. I don't think he should be number 3. I knew you were going to come out with that, so I wasn't going to add much. I had KD and Steph and AD ahead of him as well.
I mean, we can get to AD when we get to AD, but I think that KD and Steph for sure. I mean, I don't even think I feel like we've forgotten how good. I mean, maybe less KD. I feel like we've talked ourselves into Steph not being that good because he's obviously been hurt, and because obviously
he took that number 2 role. Right.
I think that people forget that the 2016 Steph was maybe the greatest individual offensive season in the history of basketball. I don't know. I just feel like we're forgetting some of this stuff.
And you can argue that he's more efficient in his in 2017, 2018, right? So Steph is just one of those players. He can do whatever you need him to do. I really think Steph's an incredible player offensively.
Yeah, and the thing that you add too, just real quick, is that it's sort of like the Bill Russell thing, right? Where Bill Russell, it's I mean, he put up good stats, but then it's his teams were just so much better when he was there, and there's not a tangible thing you point to. I mean, that's some of how Steph has been on offense for this team. It's just the numbers are good, but the effects on that team and the levels that they've gone to are kind of unmeasured almost.
And there's a reason why he has a 99 rating 3-point shot in this game.
All right, well, we can touch. I guess we'll just skip Steph when we get to him then. But back to Kawhi real quick. I mean, I think we clearly saw the Raptors were still a great team without him. Obviously, the Clippers bust. It's not all on Kawhi for that. So obviously way off Pete to blame for that. But I mean, he's just not that kind of game changer, which people actually put him at, right? They're hey, if the Clippers win, he might be, as good as MJ, right? Like he's the one who's like going to different teams and winning championships. But I think that's something we've definitely got to look into. Someone else tied with him at 96 is James Harden, and he's always, James Harden's always in the MVP race as well, putting the Rockets always on his back. Let's see, he might be a potential future 76er. But what are your thoughts on James Harden being tied at Kawhi Leonard at 96?
I agree.
I think it's too high for both of them, but them being tied is not like offensive to me. I know it might be to some, but like, yeah, okay, we haven't seen James Harden win a championship as the best player, but the 2018 Rockets are better than the 2019 Raptors, right? To me, like when I watch those games, like that's a better team than the 2019 Raptors. You can't tell me James Harden isn't that player. I've seen James Harden be that player. He's gotten some bad breaks. Obviously, he's got some injuries, and what a horrible team we saw around him this year. That kind of broke down. I do think James has a lot to prove. So obviously he's in that next tier below. Like to me, there's like that top four, LeBron, Durant, Steph, and Giannis have kind of distanced themselves from like the next group of players. And I think that like Harden and Kawhi being next to each other is fine, but they both should not be above Steph or Durant.
I completely agree with Dev on that. I think with Harden and Kawhi are similar with their leadership styles. I feel like they're not as vocal as like the leader, like LeBron or KD. They don't have that persona, and they need that like other player on their team to do that for them. But I think they both have. I have them at the same rating and just lower, just like Dev said, because I think they have their strengths and their weaknesses, and they're both really great players. I mean, they're both. James Harden's prolific offensively. Kawhi's prolific all around. So you take what you get, but I think they're equal in that regard. You're just gonna have to choose what you want out of a player.
Yeah, it's kind of funny to me because I kind of feel like Kawhi and James Harden are like the opposite players, where like James Harden is like good all the time except in the big moments, and Kawhi is okay all the time, but then obviously like, has these big moments that you can point to. But like, again, I think that it's totally reasonable to have them right next to each other. I would probably have Harden just above Leonard personally.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who's finished top 2 in MVP voting 3 years in a row, right? Like this is historic stuff. Again, it's the same sort of thing with Steph, where it's like, I understand that other stuff is happening in the basketball world, and like obviously everybody's going to get a little overlooked because LeBron James exists, and I mean that's, he gets all the attention he deserves, but like this is a guy who's gone and been in the conference finals, all these years in a row. A guy who's, led these teams to all these wins. And you mentioned that the 2018 Rockets were better than the 2019 Raptors. And here's the thing. Okay, they're probably close. The big thing that I'll say though is that the 2018 Rockets without James Harden are way worse than the 2019 Rockets.
Yeah, I agree.
Without Kawhi. So if you replace them on those teams, it's like their narratives would be totally different. So that's the thing that I guess is always going to be a little funny to me is like, it depends on how you rate players, obviously, right? Because obviously it doesn't work exactly like that. But I do think that James Harden sometimes even gets overlooked with what he's accomplished already because there are all these other guys. But yeah, I definitely, again, and same deal. Like I mentioned, Steph and KD, they should be, to me, at worst 3 and 4, and I think both have an argument for 2. But yeah, I mean, I don't have any issue with these guys being by each other.
And to jump in really quick, I talked about how Giannis had like a 1-of-1 season when adjusted for pace. When adjusted for scoring, similarly, James Harden's 2019 season was number 1. It was higher than Wilt's prolific season, higher than Jordan's best season, higher than 2006 Kobe when adjusted for era. So like it's not just like, oh, he's really good, but he's doing it in this era. No, like this is all-time historic levels of stuff that what James Harden is doing.
Right.
For sure. And, as a Mavs fan, I'm always rooting against the Rockets. But, like, I feel like, sometimes Harden goes, overlooked with the stuff he does, and, in the same range, definitely makes sense. I kind of agree with Shahan. Having him, a little head wouldn't be too bad either. So there's a couple of players listed at 95. I'm going to name them all right here. So we've got KD, we've got AD, Anthony Davis, just in case. Damian Lillard. Okay. Damian, that was for Ryan. We got Damian Lillard and Steph Curry. All 4 of these players are rated at 95. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, I have KD higher than a 95. I think he decreased because of the injury he had, which is fair because we don't know how he's going to return from injury. But I definitely agree with Sean. I have KD as number 2. He's such a, like, when healthy, given we don't know how he's going to come back from that Achilles. Those are game changer injuries, but he is such a prolific offensive player, and he's underlooked. Sean mentioned this in an earlier episode. He's underrated defensively, and he's a great leader, and he's from UT. So given all that, I think he's definitely number 2 in my book, and I think that he's proven it with his pedigree as well. And then I have Steph right below him.
So
Yeah.
I agree with everything you said. Has KD proven he's a great leader though? We will. That's probably the one thing
Yes.
I would disagree
We're gonna
on.
see that in the
Yes.
Brooklyn
I think
Nets
he's
as
proven
well.
he's a
He has
good.
this entire OKC tenure. I mean, like, I understand that, like, all this stuff with the Warriors happened, but, like, we're talking about a guy who year in and
Right.
year out, on top of that, with a player in Russell Westbrook, who is one of the most stubborn and unleadable people
Sure.
on the planet. I think, yes, we do have evidence that he can be. Now, he hasn't been consistently enough, I think you could argue, but not in a way that's, I think, in any way negatively impacted his teams.
The entire OKC tenure that he ended by complaining about how bad his cats were on Twitter.
I mean, is he wrong? But that was throwing barbs out the door. Look, okay.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, right? There are 4 guys, like you mentioned, rated with the 95. 2 of them, I think, arguably should be 97s. In Steph and KD, and I don't understand how somebody can look and I don't know exactly how the rankings work on this page in terms of, like, is Dame ranked ahead of Steph, or I don't know exactly how that works, but is it just kind of they're all the same?
Yeah, they're all the same.
They're all the same.
They just have different, stats and figures. They put them out in some order.
So look, I mean, I think that I have typically, like, in our group, probably been a little bit of a wet blanket more on AD. Like, I think that AD is certainly, one of the 10 best players in the world. But, like, there have been people jumping in with, like, is he number 2? Is he number 3? And I just, I've never quite bought into that. But, I think that obviously he's one of those elite players. And to me, like, I'm a big fan of Dame Lillard, but I cannot believe that he's with that group. Like, I just kind of can't believe that there are other guys on who are not ahead of him on this list who I'd probably consider having Dame behind, in my opinion. And I think that just to real quickly kind of talk about the tiers a little bit, right? Like, if you want to treat that top 4 tier as its own tier, I think that's fine. But I mean, if you wanted to extend it to kind of more like the true A1 guys in the NBA, I think that LeBron, Giannis, Kawhi, James Harden, Kevin Durant, and then Steph especially, I think that those 6 guys are kind of a tier of their own. And then I think that you can make the argument for AD. I think you can make the argument for Luca, who we're going to talk about in a second, as sort of being right on the cusp of that. But to me, like, I think that those 6 guys should be the top 6, and I don't really think that there's that much discussion about anybody really being close to ahead of them.
Yeah, I was shocked seeing Dame in the same level as Steph or KD. I mean, he's a great player. He's definitely proven himself, but to put him in that category, to me, is a little much. But I looked into these the way they put the ratings, and it's solely based on the statistics that's on paper. So that's where it's kind of flawed, because you have great statistics, but taken out of context. And then also the injury factors and the durability rating, which influences the rating. So I'm sure that's where Steph and KD fell because of that. Why Kawhi and James Harden may have been higher with Dame. But Anthony Davis, for some reason, I had a little higher than everybody else on this. And I don't know if it's because of his performance and recency bias from the finals, or because he's elite defensively. He has a great shot, and he can also work around the post.
Right.
He does have a little injury. So, I mean, I think he's comparable.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can definitely make the argument Anthony Davis is the best defender in the NBA, right? Like, if you're talking about defensive, like, piece, like, Anthony Davis to me is more valuable defensively than Kawhi Leonard, or, like, I think Draymond is his competition in that argument, right? But the question is, like, it's so difficult to evaluate some of these players because Anthony Davis is just a player who's better as a CFO than a CEO. He's one of those players that's just better as a number 2, and, like, letting him do that really elevates his value. He's able to fit in and do a lot of things when he doesn't have to carry like the whole load offensively, or you don't have to run through him every possession.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'd say about him is that, if you're just doing 2K ratings, if you're just doing like, here are the attributes, I think you can make an argument that Anthony Davis is a 100, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think that you can make the argument that Anthony Davis has literally every skill that you could possibly ever want on a basketball court. And obviously, like in practice, sometimes he plays like he has it and sometimes he doesn't, right? Like, and that's not like a knock on him. He's again, one of the top, I have him at number 7 in the world. That's pretty fucking good. But like, I think that if you were to just rank his attributes, right? Like there's nothing he can't do on a basketball floor. Whereas when he actually plays basketball, it's like sometimes he does some things well, sometimes he does things poorly. Like, he's a person, right? He's a human being. But yeah, I mean, again, to me, he's right on the edge of that top tier, but I wouldn't have him in it.
Yeah, you can see stretches, right? Like I know against Denver there was a stretch where he went like 9 shots in a row, like offensively, and like that's like when AD is like that, he's easily the best player in the world, right? That's where you can make that argument. Like, yeah, he has the traits to be a 100, like.
Yeah, no, for sure. As a player, he'd be amazing, right? He should be 100, right? But yeah, I kind of agree with you guys. I think KD and Steph should be in the upper tier area. Probably not the same as the other two. AD would be like right after that. And I think they boosted Dame because he is on the cover of one of the games too. So they're like,
he's on the cover of this game, right?
Yeah. But there's like 3 covers of it.
So. Okay, gotcha.
Well, that makes more sense.
So they're like, yeah, we can't have like a 92 as our cover. So yeah, so he's up here with the 95, and yeah. I
mean, maybe rapping is one of the attributes that they evaluate. I don't know.
I think he has a song on the game too, and it is what it is. So right here we've got my favorite. We got Luca right here at a 94 in a zone by himself. No one else is a 94. Funny enough, last year I think he ended up as a 95. So they nerfed him. They're like, hey, in this game, not as good. You're a 94. But I think that's pretty fair. Behind this upper tier, he is the 1A on the team. He is, up and coming. He's shown, he was in the MVP conversation for quite a few months this season. So I'm totally cool with this one. What are you guys? What are your thoughts on this?
The funny thing now is that, with Luca, obviously, I think that we all are. I think we can all say at this point, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's in 2 or 3 years, like he's going to be a top 5 player. That he will finish, top 2, top 3 in MVP voting. And probably will win one. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think gets a little funny here, right, is that, it's kind of like what we were talking about with, like, Harden versus Kawhi, right, where, like, to me, that's kind of funny with, like, the Doncic versus Butler thing, right, because, like, Jimmy Butler just went and did the thing, right, and so, like, I don't know exactly how you would compare those kind of things against each other, because, like, again, it's like the Harden thing where, like, Harden has been better every single week, every single month, but then it's like, oh my gosh, Jimmy Butler just did that giant thing, put the team on his back, won finals games. I probably would have Doncic ahead, but like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a little bit of it's kind of an interesting question for me, just because, like, again, you're with the Doncic thing is also interesting too, because obviously there's so much like talk about what he's about to do too, and like, because he's obviously done a whole lot already, but there's so much of the talk about him is what he's going to do. And so, I don't know exactly how to rate him in a game like this because of that.
Right, which we'll see if we get to Jason Tatum, right? Who's also way overrated.
Yeah,
whoa. I would not put Luca in this conversation of way overrated.
No. Like I think Luca is like, the way we talk about Luca is a lot about what he can do and what he is going to do. Tatum has not like done what Luca has done, right?
Trust me, I got some thoughts on Tatum. We can get to that in a second.
Yeah, and I guess it is a kind of interesting question. Obviously Butler did make it to the finals. Of course, it is what Luca's second year. I mean, this guy's fantastic.
That's my point, though, right?
But the point is he's already doing so much as well, right? Like people didn't expect this jump from rookie year to MVP conversation in 1 year, right? Like, people thought rookie year Luca is all you're gonna get.
Right, but when we're comparing him to Jimmy Butler, if we look at the playoffs, right? Luca had 2 Herculean games to win games against the Clippers, right? Jimmy Butler had 2 even better games to win games against the Lakers. I think that you can make the argument Luca is deserves to be higher because he's the better day in, day out. You get the same from him every player. But at their peak, Butler might be better right now.
But I think at the end of the day, all these top 10 players, you can take one of these players, put them on a 15 and 60 team or whatever, and immediately transform them. Like that one player will do it. I think all 10 of these have that capability.
Yeah, and we're not when we're talking about Doncic and Butler, it's not like they're like way ratings off, right? It's a 94 and 93 right here. We've got Jimmy Butler rounding out the top 10 at a 93, and like we said, we can talk about this more, Doncic and Butler, but yeah, Butler's been someone a lot of people have been down on, right? Because of his past, career, be like, oh, he's not a great player, he's not a good teammate. But like we saw it, full hand, he was the captain, he was running the show with Miami, and he made them into the finals contenders that they are. And I feel like, yeah, he definitely should be in top 10. I think we'll move on to couple of names right here, just rounding out. We had like Joel Embiid at a 91 at 11. Jason Tatum, Dev's favorite player, at a 90, ranked number 12 overall. Then we got the Joker at 90 as well.
So this is where I have to jump in.
Give me 1 second, Shahan. Let me just round out the 90s. So we got Tatum at a 90, Jokic at a 90, Kat at a 90, and Kyrie Irving, number 15 overall, at a 90 as well.
So what the hell is anybody watching if they watch the playoffs this year and we're like, who's better than Nikola Jokic? Jason Tatum. Like,
yeah,
are you fucking kidding me? Like, I mean, come on. Tatum's a really nice player, right? Like a top 15 player. Nobody is questioning that. But what the hell are you watching if you watched this playoffs and thought that Tatum was more impactful than Jokic was? Like, Jokic was the centerpiece of that Nuggets team. Everything flowed around him. He is the reason, and obviously along with Jamal Murray having a great playoffs, because he was playing off of Jokic, the reason that they were in the conference finals. And obviously, they couldn't compete with the Lakers for most of it, and that's fine. That's a reasonable place to be, to not be able to compete with the Lakers. Whereas, again, you have a team in the Celtics, and, like, again, this isn't a team-wide thing. I don't like making this too much of a team-wide thing, but, like, I mean, look, the Celtics are a perfect situation for Jason Tatum. He doesn't have to do anything that he's not good at because the team is built around the team. Whereas the Nuggets are built around what Jokic can and can't do. When they play well, it's because he's doing things well. When they don't, it's because he has limitations, right? And, like, I'm not saying that Jokic is some perfect player here, but I don't understand how you can walk away from this playoffs being like, we proved once and for all that Jason Tatum is better than Nikola Jokic. Like, I just don't get it.
Right, and when you talk about like competing against the Lakers, right? Obviously, we saw like the Heat were the closest this postseason to competing against the Lakers. The Nuggets were right there. I mean, they're one AD shot from also winning 2 games against the Lakers, right? Like the Nuggets did compete at moments in this series. They're a good team. They're a really good team. And Jokic, like, forget Jason Tatum. You have Kyrie Irving in this conversation. Kyrie's not in this conversation. Kat's not in this conversation. Joel's not in this conversation. All of those are way lower. Like, Jokic is clearly, to me, better. Joel is the only one that's
Joel
close.
is the one guy who I'd have like right in this, maybe at the same ranking. And I will say too, I expect that if there's a player who by the end of the season who's going to move up the most, I think that Embiid potentially could be that. With Morey ball coming in, obviously. But yeah, I don't know, man. What is Jason Tatum showed you that he deserves to be ahead of Jokic and in that conversation with Embiid, right? Like, he's right on the edge of the top 10.
What he showed you was that he could win a poll on Twitter as being the future of the NBA. I mean, that's what it is right here. Rodney 2K is always on Twitter. He saw that. He's like, people love Tatum. We're going to boost him up to 90. But, like, this is ridiculous. We've talked about Joker in the past. We've talked about his records. Like, this guy is the man, right? Like you mentioned, like, Tatum is part of a system, right? He's a cog in the machine. He does what he does really well. But, like, he's not the A1 player like the rest of these players are, And that's really weird.
Yeah.
Joel Embiid, I feel like we've talked about this. He has the potential if he stays healthy. He has the skills to be that kind of guy. But yeah, I put him a little bit below Jokic. Kat, I love the guy, but also, he shouldn't be here.
Yeah, I mean,
Kyrie, And Kyrie, for just being toxic, needs to drop like 5 points.
The thing that I think of the second tier, or like sort of the outside of the top 10 conversation, is really interesting because like I think that it really comes down to what you value at this point, right? So like for example, I mean, I think that you talk about a Tatum, right? And I understand why, like, Tatum again is top 15. Like, I'm not trying to say that he's not top 15. I just think that he's a tier below the Jokic and the Embiids of the world. But like, it's all of a sudden where it's like, all right, I mean, are you like putting him on this different planet than Chris Paul, right? Like, are you putting him on this different planet than, I mean, even with the second tier, I mean, it's kind of funny because you got these like sort of up and coming scorers, right? Like these guys who score and do some other stuff, but they mostly score, right? The Donovan Mitchells, you got obviously the Devin Bookers, the Bradley Beals. I'm actually surprised, and for me, pleasantly surprised how high Trae Young is on the list, right? Like I think that Trae Young, look, if Trae, I mean, we have a whole other rant that we can get into for that. If Trae Young wasn't traded for Luca Doncic, then we would be blowing our minds over how great Trae Young is. But we can only think of the league in context of the fun white guy. But Trae Young has obviously been an outstanding player to this point, and it's like, I don't know. It's so hard for me to kind of parse through what exactly people value on these kinds of lists. Because again, if you value like straight up scoring and like attributes per se, like Tatum's not in a different tier than a Bradley Beal, right? Like I think that Bradley Beal kind of gets screwed in these conversations. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my short answer is that I see Jason Tatum as being way more in that clump than I do in this like top tier.
And you mentioned like top 10. I did want to get to it. Jokic is in my top 10. Dame Lillard is not. Like, so I know Dame Lillard was up there. He was like way ahead because I think he's a 95.
Yeah.
Right. And Jokic is sitting here at a 90. Dame Lillard is not in my top 10. Jokic is. I have Embiid also ahead of Lillard. Lillard's 12 for me. Yeah. So.
He's 11 for me. I have him right in between Jokic and Embiid. So I mean, but like again, I think that when you get to that 12, at that point,
that's the cutoff.
That's a cutoff, right? Yeah. And so then you can have the conversations about the Tatums. You can have the conversation about the Kyries. You can start to weigh what you value with like the Clays of the world and the Chris Pauls of the world. I don't really. The other guy who I understand why Paul George is getting a little screwed on this because of how he played in the playoffs. Like, I mean, I get it, but he is getting a little screwed on this. I do think that he's closer to that top 12 than he is to that middle group. But, I mean, look, if you're going to call yourself playoff P and then you shoot 12% in the playoffs or whatever, man, it's that's on you.
Yeah, I mean, there's just this huge-ass clump of players at 88, man, like Mitchell, Young, Paul, George, actually Chris Paul, Paul George, Westbrook, Siakam, Booker, Beal. I mean, these are actually, like, really lovely, talented players. I'm glad they have Beal up there with Booker, but it's just a whole weird clump. And you're right, PG did this to himself, all right?
So okay, let's each pick one guy who has never been All-NBA who we think was going to make that jump.
Right. I would pick Devin Booker probably. I think Devin Booker could be third team All NBA this year.
I don't. Has Donovan Mitchell been All NBA?
No.
I don't think so.
I think Donovan Mitchell, because he's been like really consistent and solid the past couple of years, and he's been greater and greater every year. I think he definitely jumps in at some point.
Man, that's tough. I mean, I don't know. Has Bradley Beal made it yet?
I don't think so. I don't
think he's always been snubbed.
He definitely got screwed last year.
The thing that sucks about for Brad Beal is just that like they always count team success against him, and like I mean he's averaging like 30 and 7, and just nobody cares. It sucks.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Beal, and I mean, obviously he's always missing Wall, dude. He's just always the only one carrying the team, and he gets screwed because of it. But yeah, I'll go with Bradley Beal.
Yeah, I definitely will heavily consider continuing my Trae Young campaign. But here's the thing: we need one team defender. Just give me one goddamn team defender on the Atlanta Hawks so that we can shut the hell up about point guard defense, because nobody gives a shit. Give me one good team defender, and I think that Trae Young's in good shape. Because, I mean, the dude averaged 30 and 10 last year, but because I don't think that they're going to find one, I'm going to say Bam. I think that he takes what happened in the playoffs. I think that this team's going to really come together in a big way. And I do think that, Jimmy Butler's still going to be the vocal leader and obviously the primary ball handler. But I think that it's going to become even more clear this upcoming year that Bam is the guy, and Bam is potentially an all-NBA center. And obviously it helps that he plays center, so he only has to compete against those guys.
Right, another bubble breakout superstar.
Right.
That guy was amazing. Obviously, we're doing this, before the season starts and before the draft and before the free agency. So we'll do another episode to talk about the upcoming year and our thoughts on that. Well, that wraps up another great episode of the Sheesh and Friends podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, we're out. See ya.